to do 5:30? I don't know when the next one is off the top of my head.
It's probably 5:30. I'll remember the next one. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, no problem. All right, I guess we'll get started. I will call to order the August 20 meeting of the Ways and Means Committee. Roll call, please.
Chairwoman Sims.
Here.
Alderman Gould.
Jeff, you look like you're here.
And Alderwoman Tice.
Here.
Item number 2 on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to be made to the agenda, or if not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
we've got a motion to approve by Nancy, second by Kathy. That will be approved by acclamation. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, moving right along. Item number 3, we don't have any announcements, appointments, proclamations, or recognitions. Item number 4, citizen comments. Shelley, I don't know if we have anyone do we have anyone? Well, if there are any citizens out there, please, now's the time you'd like to make a comment. Please state your name and your address, and you'll be given up to 3 minutes to comment.
Have any?
Going once, going twice. All right, moving right along. Item number 5 are reports of the committee chair and the alderman. I do not have a report at this time. Alderman Gould. I think he might be having some technical difficulty because he's currently a rotating circle on my screen. So we'll come back to him if he comes back. Alderwoman Tice.
No report.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
No report.
Okay, well, we'll move on, and if when he comes back on and he has like a report, I'll recognize him. Oh, there you go, Jeff or Alderman Gould. Do you have a report? You can shake your head if you don't, since there's no sound apparently. Okay. Item 6, administrative report. 6A, 2021 annual budget process, tentative calendar. Who's taking that one?
So I think there are no additional changes to the budget calendar. I believe that under your leadership, we've allocated a lot of time and discussion to include a lot more meetings so that we can be respectful of everybody's time and not feel a crunch to have, lengthy discussions about, different items that are part of the budget process. So in September, we have the Citizen Budget Forum, and I've been talking to Janet, and so we're going to be talking that up in the community on our social media platform. For those of you who have monthly ward meetings, please help us get that out. I think it's important that residents convey to you other needs that they may want the city to address. I mean, you all have heard loud and clear about stormwater issues. Last year, that wasn't really even part of the budget. We just took that up mid-year, and happy to note that we had the first reading on Monday, so next meeting it'll be approved. So things like that, the department heads aren't knowledgeable about because residents haven't conveyed it to them, or I'm not knowledgeable about. We want to rely on you all to help us find out what those are so that we can fully investigate it more and bring it to your attention. So in terms of the budget process, that's just an update as to what's coming up next. That's the only update I have.
Thank you, Bola. And I would just, comment. We spent some time on the schedule last time. I don't believe we need to have a meeting for the sake of having a meeting, but I just like to be on everyone's calendar and have have a process. And if it ends up that we don't need it, great. But I feel better if I at least have the time blocked out and a general idea of what may be able to be accomplished. I mean, I know it's fluid. But so I appreciate the budget process, and hopefully we'll be able to follow it. Does anyone have any questions on that? Okay, moving along. Item 7, department reports. 7A is human resources compensation consultant. Who do we have that's taken that?
Jason Coates.
Okey doke.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we had received a number of submittals to the RFP that we put out. I provided a memo to that effect and kind of gave a short list of pros and cons. Bola and I still have to kind of sit down and go through the top few. The prices on these ranged considerably from the low end being $24,500 to the outrageous high end being $97,000. The top 2 I more or less discounted out of hand because the cost seemed to be out of bounds with the remainder. The remaining 7 I went through and took a look at, and I kind of pared it down to the top 2 in my opinion. The top 2 being, one of which being the incumbent, which was Higbee and Associates. They did come in higher than they did the first time. The first time they did our compensation analysis, it was about $18,500. This time they're looking at about $30,500, but it is 6 years after the fact. The other firm was REDW. REDW came in at $24,500. They have some additional options which could ratchet that cost up. If we went with all of the options that REDW had, it would take it up to a little over $32,000. I don't necessarily think the third of their options was necessary, so they would theoretically come in at about $27,500. Both of these have their advantages and disadvantages. For Higbee, on the advantage side, they are the incumbent, so they're not starting from scratch. They are familiar with our organization. They're familiar with our comparator cities. They've done this type of work before. They helped initiate the program that we're at now, and they have a good understanding of our compensation strategy, provided that we're to remain the same. So from that standpoint, they could more or less hit the ground running with just a couple of additional bits of information. REDW, they are an outside firm. They're located in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Phoenix, Arizona. Their plan, I have to admit, I really liked the presentation that they put forward and the information that they provided. They also offer a supplementary software that is above, that would cost above that $24,000 mark, but the cost is reasonable for what we would need to do if we decided to implement that. Bola and I are looking at having a more in-depth interview with both of those 2 firms next week to come to a final determination of which we would like to bring to the Ways and Means and ultimately the board for implementation.
Does anyone have any questions for Jason?
I'd make a comment that sometimes I think we, or any firm or any entity, gets hooked into the same thing over and over. It's just easier to use the same firm and all. I think there's a value to have someone who's fresh coming in to do it. The fact that you've come up with these 2, one's an incumbent, one would be new. I'd like to hear what you come up with, and I would probably, if they're equal, be inclined to go with REDW simply because they might have a fresh look at it. I don't know how others feel about that.
I honestly could be persuaded either way. You know, the reasons to, you know, that they're familiar with us might be the reason not to pick them because they're familiar with us. You know, but I'm not, Bola or Jason, neither of you are prepared to make a recommendation at this time. This is sort of for informational and you're still fact gathering. Is that right?
That's correct.
But yeah, Kathy, I think you make a good point. Do we know, and this may be premature, you know, in terms of how long, you know, once we select them, about how long it might take to get the report? Might it be something that we could incorporate into our budget process?
Higbee had indicated 90 days on theirs. I'd have to go back through REDW, but I believe that they were somewhat similar in timetable. When I initially put out the RFP, we had to kind of modify our timeline, and we're already kind of eating into that redone timeline. So I think no matter what we do, it would probably be at the very tail end of the year that we would receive anything, and any suggested implementation may need to be done in early 2021. And then if we chose to retroactively go back, if it were to positively impact individuals, obviously we don't want to negatively impact individuals, but if it were to positively impact individuals, we could go back and retroactively make those individuals quote unquote whole. We have done that in the past. Right after I came on board in 2017, the board ultimately approved a modification to the existing pay structures in mid to the tail end of March, which we then went in and put into place and retroed back to the beginning of the year. So the hope that we would potentially get these in time for the budget is probably not going to happen, regardless of what firm we went with, even if we did choose to go back with Higbee and Associates. But again, we can modify things and retroactively implement, provided that's what the board wants to do. Or we could just pick a date in the sand and go forward from that date. Not saying we have to retroactively go back, but we could do that if we wanted to.
So I would add on that, when the board decided to retain a compensation consultant back in 2014, the board didn't approve a final compensation schedule until 2016. So 14, 15, 16. So what we just did was we carried an amount of money that from year to year to year until it got approved. And if you remember, at that time, we were also doing a significant rewrite of the employee handbook and doing away with longevity pay. So it was a little bit more complicated then. But, we've done it before and I think Jason sent me an email maybe a week or so ago with a ballpark number that we would carry in the budget, so that if the pay scale changed, there would be sufficient funds in the budget to implement this. And obviously, we think about COVID and all of that as well, but I don't foresee it to be a problem. I just don't feel that something as important as this, we should be looking to rush through it.
And if I may, just to kind of tack on to that, what I have provided for BOLA and for Karen, just as preliminary budget numbers, was based on our current pay structure. I went ahead and took the impression that the board would approve the next step of rate increases across the board for those affected individuals. And so we've already got that baseline to start with. That number was approximately $150,000, which is what we generally see on a year-to-year rate increase basis. And then we would build, in addition to that, a potential buffer to make up, like Bola had said, if we need to make modifications and go back and retroactively change things, or if the board changes its strategy from the 75th percentile to something different.
Alderman Gould, did I see your hand go up?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Sorry for the technical difficulties there. Can you explain to me what drives the decision to undergo this every so often? Are we concerned that we are underpaid? There are many people underpaid that are on staff at the city. Are there people that are disgruntled or upset and thinking that they are, and we just want to establish a baseline and make sure? Or is this just a procedural thing that municipalities do every so often?
It's procedural. You want to stay competitive with the market. You want to make sure that you are paying competitively in a way that you don't lose your employees, to other municipalities around us. And the whole premise for doing this is that the city never had a formal pay plan. And we needed to create one. And in doing so, we had to start from scratch and audit all our positions, meet with groups of employees who share same titles, and incumbents that were unique. They were the only ones within those positions. And most cities do this every other year. In the past, we had an outfit out of Illinois, state of Illinois, called public salaries, where you would go in and enter, your salaries for all your positions. The problem that created was that those who you considered to be your comparators, you looked at demographic, you look at population, you look at square miles, you look at budget, you look at, their commercial base, not all of them were participating in this. And then what you'd have to do is start cold calling, saying, city manager, city administrator, would you share this salary? Could you tell me how long that person's been in that position? It becomes a lengthy survey. And you want to make sure you're comparing apples to apples. So it's best to have a professional come in and do it. I must say that in a previous job, when I was hired, that was the primary duty that I was tasked with. And if you're doing other things and you're not the consultant who can allocate time for it, that is all you do, which is why there's a benefit to doing that. More and more cities in the St. Louis Metroplex have hired a consultant to do that.
Okay. Yeah, and have we experienced a lot of turnover, or are we just,
In certain positions we do. For example, in parks, we hire individuals out of college, and then in a year they gain experience and leave us to go to another city. We want to make sure, especially though, in our public safety, police and fire, that we remain
Absolutely.
competitive so that they stay and we don't become a training ground for them where they go to another municipality. We have established that we cannot compete in terms of compensation with districts, because districts have a sole taxing authority or taxing entity that just funds a fire district. Whereas in municipalities like us, not only are we funding police and fire, we're funding streets improvement, trash pickup, and planning development, other things like that. So it's not a true apples to apples comparison as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Okay, well, we'll move along. Item 7C is the 2019 annual audit update.
Can we go to B?
Did I skip over that? I'm sorry. When I
Thank
said
you.
C, I meant B. 7B is insurance RFP update.
Jason.
That also falls to me. I went back and looked at one of the earlier Ways and Means Committee meetings where we talked about this, just to make sure that I was on the right page. So we went out for an RFP for an insurance consultant to come in, take a look at the programs, the plans that we currently have in effect, make sure that we have the proper amount of coverage, make sure that we're not being overcharged or undercharged, and that is currently ongoing. To date, I've only received one back, but it does close next Friday. So the hope would be once next Friday comes and goes, we'll have a few more. I've had a couple of inquiries with regards to that particular RFP, so I would expect that we would see possibly 2, maybe 3 more. The first one that we received is from a Brown, Smith & Wallace. I don't want to necessarily get into the details of it as of yet. I'd rather put together a memo, much like I did for the compensation one, to kind of compare and contrast and make a recommendation at that point. But I did want to make sure that the Ways and Means Committee was aware that we did take that under advisement and we are working towards that goal.
That's good to know. Are any questions from the committee on that? So I guess we'll just wait to hear for updates on that one. So next item on the agenda is item 7C, an audit update. Who's taking that one? Karen?
I guess so.
We're all, hold on, I don't know who's taking it.
It's also
Karen.
known as a impacted wisdom tooth. That's about how bad it hurts. We just had a brief meeting at about 3:30, a phone conference with the auditor. Michelle from Bot Steel was not on the call, but she has been working with Jackie, my staff member, and I today, wrapping up some of the things she needs to finish the actual financials. And according to Amy of Daniel and Jones, once they get what they need, it will be 45 days approximately, or 4 to 6 weeks before they will be done with what they need to do. So the earliest 4 to 6 weeks from now. That's all I have.
How long will it take when you say it'll take 4 to 6 weeks from the time they get what they need? What do they need? How long will that take?
I don't know. That's Michelle of Bot Steel, and she's still working on some things. One of the major things at this point, other than the fixed assets, that we used to pay $2,500 to a company to do, and I did it this year, and it took me probably a week or more to do it. The other thing is we, per the audit last year, had to add all those funds, which were about 10, that cover our debt. It had all been done manually in the past, back since before I came, done manually, adjustments made manually, everything kept on the books manually. All that had to be entered in, and all the various bank statements, which there are about 15, had to be reconciled and had to be put in the system, beginning balances, adjustments made, and ending balances. And that is what Michelle of Bot Steel was working on. She sent that to me, but there still seems to be something not reconciling somewhere in that. But that was a lot of work. So that's what her and I are looking at this point. Once we get that wrapped up, then we can print out a trial balance and what the auditors need. But we can't do that until that portion of it's done. So that's what they're waiting on. I lost my CPA in January, and he was working on these projects, particularly the fixed assets. He was working on there's another big portion of the reconciliation of the construction escrow, which is what we work with planning and development. And that was something else that I had to do that took about another week's worth of my time. So I am doing the best I can to get what I can get done. And now that we have a temp, it's freed up Jackie, my staff accountant's day-to-day work or operational work, to be able to help me and assist me to finish up what needs to be done so that we can move on.
Alderwoman Tice. Ian, you're muted, by the way.
Thank you. So Karen, I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around the process. So you have to finish getting stuff to Michelle at Bot Steel.
Yes.
And then, so how long will that take?
How long will it take for me to get it to her?
Yeah,
I don't know.
And then, so you don't, and then how long does she take to deal with the stuff?
That I really can't answer because we have to email back and forth. So she's working on other projects. So sometimes we email, like Jackie and I will email, and it might be 2 or 3 days before we hear back from her. Like if she's asked for something or we've asked her for something, it just depends on her work schedule. So
you don't really know when that's going to be done. And then it takes Daniel Jones 4 to 6 weeks. So we're kind of back where we were last year, which, I mean, I was new last year. So last year sort of seemed like an anomaly, and now we're back here again. And I know you lost staff, but it seems like maybe we could have heard about this earlier in the year, so we weren't at the end of the year in a crunch again with trying to get this finished. I mean,
you're right. I don't have an assistant finance director, and I lost my person, and I didn't have a temp. There was no way the three of us people could get that audit stuff done. We thought we could, but it didn't happen. It's only so many hours in a day that we can put in.
Does this have, and what kind of implications does this have on our, we are borrowing a lot of money. Does this impact that at all? Karen or Bola? I don't know who the right.
I have a call in to Mark Grimm, and I'll be sharing whatever I hear from him with the board.
I'm sure it does. Sure, it affects it in probably in a negative way, but it's on me because it's the finance department, but there's nothing I can do about it. I can only do so much, and with us having to move twice. We were without computers for nearly a week when we moved. We had no IT to help us. Yeah, those all sound like excuses, but they were the facts. And here we are, August, possibly September, maybe October, but I can't help that. I'm one person, and my staff were here through the entire COVID. They had more work due to a lot of refunds that was more paperwork. So it is what it is. I apologize for it, but there is nothing I can do about it. And I'm trying to get it done, but quite honestly, it's affected my health. And I refuse to let that happen anymore. So I know it's not good for the city, but I'm doing the best I can, as are my staff. You can ask them. We were here through the entire COVID. We were some of the only staff that were here, while they were hearing stories of other people not here. But I'm sorry. It's just the facts. That's what it is.
Is there a manpower issue, like something that perhaps we can assist with? I'm not saying, my focus is sort of less philosophical and more like stop, triage. I mean, if you're, I understand you're one person and there's so many hours in a day, and but would it, I don't know, like, can we get bean counters in there? I'm not exactly sure what needs to happen, but if it takes more sets of hands, is there some, would you be helped if we looked into getting that for you?
Well, you approved an assistant finance director, but we don't have one yet. And you approved a temp, which we did get about 2 weeks ago, which they're not full-time, but they are helping in that respect, and that the day-to-day operations that the information that they need. This isn't something I can give a clerk. It takes a lot of time. And like I said, all that fixed asset work, we paid a company since I've been here $2,500 a year to do it. And I did it this year. And it took me probably more than 40 hours. I came in on a Sunday.
Karen, I'm not trying to.
I know.
I'm not trying to throw you over the barrel. I'm trying to be a solution finder. Like, is there something that we can do?
And you guys did approve an assistant finance director, but I don't have an assistant finance director. I have a temp.
Well, not even, I'm not talking about, that's what I mean. I don't mean philosophically, like, what needs to happen. I'm meaning, like, if we need some hands on deck, and I don't even know what that person is. Is there someone can we look into getting you, for lack of a better phrase, temp help? I mean, I don't even know who that, I hear you what you say about a clerk, but what could we do to look into to getting you manpower?
I don't know. If Jason's on the phone, Jason, where are we getting an assistant finance director? That's what I need. Are you on the phone, Jason?
Am I still unmuted or not?
We can hear you.
You're fine.
I'm prepared to start the process. I just have not been given the green light to do that.
I'm just saying, to me, it sounds like a finance director, a full-time or an assistant finance director is like, that's, to hire someone like that full-time seems like that's not going to be a solution to your immediate problem. Although I know macroly it is, or will be helped. Is there someone, like, I'm talking about, like, the dam has been breached and we need to plug it up. Like, is there, apart from that being, an approved position and needing to be filled, like, are there temps that we can get in there to help you? That's more my focus. I mean, it's more of an immediate address of an issue that you're describing.
There are temp agencies that will provide individuals at that level. Obviously, it's a significant cost associated with it. We could do that in relative short order. I will need Karen's assistance in getting someone to that effect, because I'm not in a position to evaluate their skill set. The process of hiring an assistant finance director, you're absolutely right. Even if I put the ad out before the end of this meeting, we're still a minimum of 6 weeks from probably getting a body on hand. And if that individual did not come from a municipality, it may take upwards of 4 to 6 weeks to get them up to speed. but I can work with Karen to try to get her temp help at that level. We also would then have to look at where we could house that individual, but that's minor in the grand scheme of things.
Kathy?
I'm a little confused. If the position of assistant finance director has been approved, why hasn't that been implemented, and why are we looking at a vacant chair? It seems to me that this could have been done in the past. So can we go forward from this now and help Karen that way?
Absolutely.
I saw a red flag that, you know, what I heard from Karen, that this may be negatively impacting our credit rating. And to me, it's like, that's a problem that needs, you know, urgent corrective action. So, you know, and I don't know if this is a motion or, I mean, what I heard from Jason, I'd like to see options, and you know, Bola or Karen, whomever this is directed to, you know, is there something, you know, a short-term, you know, immediate response, or, you know, not something like because I know the runway you need to hire someone full-time, that's probably not the solution. But I mean, I would be interested in options that would be a solution, and hearing about them. I don't know, I'm not expecting you to have come ready to have that conversation now, but I'm saying that, you know, my ears are open.
Well, I think we started down that path by getting this temp that frees up my one person that I feel can handle the higher level of what needs to be done. But she couldn't do it and do her day-to-day work, because you just can't have them stop doing the financial work. And the other thing, when the person left in January, that person did stuff that I can't give to my other two staff, because I have to keep the controls in place, and I can't have the person issuing checks being the person, you know, checking the check, signing off on check requests. So we have that issue. So we did take a step in the right direction by getting a temp in here to release some of the day-to-day operational stuff off of my one person, so that she can help me, and that's what she's been doing. But first she had to train that person in order to get them. So, you know, there was a time, but I feel pretty comfortable that this person's picked up really well, and that's what my senior staff and I've been doing.
Alderman Gould?
Yeah, I mean, Alderwoman Sims, I totally agree that this is critically important. And if we need to authorize an additional temp to help take the daily burdens off and buy us some time to be able to fill the position, you know, what do we need to do for that? Do we need to make a motion tonight? Is that going to go to the board? I mean, what's the process for doing that? It seems like you need additional support. And if one temp helped you, but is still not enough to allow you and the other senior folks to focus on the audit, then let's get an additional person to help triage it, and so we can get past this.
Alderwoman Tice?
Yeah, I completely agree. It seems like we've got to triage and fix this now. The solution, hopefully, for next year is this assistant finance director, but we got to fix this right now, because this is really has the potential to be a crisis for the.
It's concerning.
But it's not good for the city.
Could you make a motion authorizing me to bring in someone or two to assist? And typically what this would require is some sort of agreement, and we could bring that formally to the board on the 18th for you all to summarily approve it, but you would give me the authorization now to do so.
I would entertain that motion.
I'll make that motion.
So the motion of what Bola said
Right.
I'll make Bola's motion.
has been firsted by Alderwoman Tice. Do I have a second? And seconded, Google beat you, Kathy? I think you may have. So now we have a first and a second. Is there a discussion?
I have a question, because if Karen needs help now, we're talking about going to the board a month from now. And then,
So-
Oh,
But
I
what,
think my
what I
motion was
asked
to,
for,
I think my motion was to allow Bola to do it now,
exactly.
and then it would come to the board for information in September. Is that,
Right.
is that the motion I made, Bola?
Yes, it's correct.
that sounds fine.
Are there any other questions? Okay, we'll take a roll call on that one.
Chairwoman Sims,
Yes.
Alderman Gould,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill,
Yes.
and Alderwoman Tice.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, so are there any other matters to report on that line item?
Not for me.
Okay. I do want to know, as we review this last year, I'm looking forward into next year, and I know that these things will be helped by hiring staff, however that's been defined. But it sounds like this was a problem that was occurring for several months, and I think let's learn from past experience that that I know I'd like to, and I don't feel like it was brought to my attention. So going forward, if you're seeing sort of the train going off the rails, in January, February, March, and I know that COVID was around. I mean, we want to know about it so we can, if we need to get you more staff, even on a temporary basis, so we can, try to avoid what is happening today from happening.
Well, I have a
now,
question.
happening.
Am I getting an assistant finance director anytime soon? Jason, Bola, am I getting an assistant finance director?
The process
use one.
for hiring a position, any position, at a minimum is 90 days. So even if we had started that process, it would not help us address the immediate issue.
Well, we haven't even started it, and it got approved last month by the board. And we haven't started it.
So as I was saying, the immediate need is to bring someone in to help Karen right now. Ultimately, yes, that position will be filled. But right now, I think the immediacy is freeing up some of Karen's time and some of her staff so that they can complete this audit. And as you all know, we're also in the middle of the budget process. So it would be my intention that, and hopefully Karen agrees, that this person would assist with the budget as well.
Can we ask if Jason can begin the search for an assistant as well as doing the temps? Is it possible to go in both directions at the same time?
I'll be bringing in the temp. So, and I think I'll be able to find people that definitely have municipal government modified accrual experience. So we can begin the process of the assistant finance director, definitely. But I think I have the temp figured out.
I'm inclined to, that's, to me, I hear that seems like an important position, and I don't want to feel like my back's to the wall, and, so I have to pick someone because, of emergency, regardless of how we got there, that's where we are. So, I mean, I assume, I'm hearing that we can get temps in there to maybe cure, fix the problem at hand. But I mean, I would like the selection of that person to be deliberate and pursuant to,
Right.
best practices.
That's important. You're right.
So, all right. Well, are there any other questions on that matter? All right. So we will move along to item D, which is the 2021 proposed budget update.
Yeah, just a second. So I think you had a memo, or it was in the public documents, and then you have this spreadsheet. The memo pretty much explains how the numbers were arrived. If you want me to explain it, I will, but it's pretty much self-explanatory. Otherwise, I'll just, if there's any questions. I
I
will
think
be
maybe
happy
some
to
high level
entertain.
explanation might, I mean, not just for us, for those who might be listening in, you know, just sort of, if you could briefly describe, you know, what we're
Okay.
looking at.
You basically got a 5-year of all the general fund revenues by line item, the main revenues for capital, the sales tax for economic development, and stormwater and parks, and then sewer is only assessments, which are, you know, tacked on the property taxes. So that's you were also given what we've received through July 31st. And then in the blue column of the spreadsheet is estimated what we think we will get for the whole year. Then the proposed for 21, and then the far right's the percent change. The numbers for sales tax, I think other than economic development, were as the memo says, well, first let me go to the general fund. Overall, you will see that it's a reduction of 2.53%. That's because it looks like we probably are going to come in under budget, the blue column under the general fund, slightly. Part of that is due to one of our larger tickets is occupational licenses, which we budgeted $1.5 million. We probably are looking at 1.4 million. That was based on a lot of cleanup and work by Lisa's department, people who moved out. So anyway, it looks like we would come in slightly under. So therefore, based on that, that's where I went with 2021. So budget-wise, we will probably be coming in for 2021 under what we did for 2020. Also tied into that is we don't know what's going to happen with COVID, so we're trying to be a little more on the conservative side. For the Economic Development Fund, I know it says we've been told 3.2 million, but what we should expect to see. But again, because of COVID, I kind of went with more a conservative approach, which still would cover what our anticipated debt service payments would be. But it may come into the 3.2 million, and that'd be great. It would fall into the fund balance, but I'm not sure about that. So I think we should be more conservative. For stormwater, the same thing as sales tax. All of those are based on basically what we think we're going to get by the end of the year, and then add 1%. And then pretty much sewer improvement, the assessment doesn't change. It's about $148,000. So again, you're only looking at the revenue side. The departments are working on their budgets right now. And that'll come later, at a later time.
Are there any questions? Alderwoman Tice?
I have 3 questions. The first is sort of small in scale, but the no, I didn't write down the line.
Are you on the spreadsheet?
I'm on the spreadsheet, and it's on the it's the cable.
Yep. Yep. Cablevision, about 4060.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're estimating that we'll get 115 this year, and you're proposing 117 for next year, and we're already, that's down 20, almost 25% from budget. I know it's not much money, but everybody's dropping cable. There are no sports. I can't imagine. I mean, I think even more, because there are no sports, more people are going to drop cable. It's a small line item, but my recommendation would be to take that one down.
Well, we did take it down 24% from 2020.
Right, but even if you're estimating actual of 115 and you're saying it's going to be more than what it is this year, it's not, I mean, I go back to, it's like hardly any money, but just, I don't know, that's my 2 cents. You all are the experts, but my 2 cents is that people are dropping cable and we're not going to get taxes from cable. And the only reason a lot of people have cable because of sports. So,
$2,000 difference, I can make that change.
yeah, so, and then this might only be helpful for me, but could you add a column at the end that compares your estimated to the proposed?
Wait. Estimated to propose. So you're talking about the estimated, like the blue column
The blue
compared
column to the green column, as opposed to budget to budget.
Okay,
Because this was such an unusual year with COVID,
Right.
it might be nice to see that.
but you want both columns though, right?
Oh, yeah,
Right.
if you could,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then my last question is the economic development sales tax. Is there a reason, I mean, we were sort of under the assumption it would be 3.2. Is that something? I
Well-
understand the lag at the beginning of the year because we collect tax revenues later, but
Right.
what's
So
going on?
if you sort of take an average of what we've gotten through July, but forget the first 2 months, so really it's only 5 months,
Mhm.
it would still only come out to like that 2.7 million that we're proposing, maybe 2.8.
Yeah.
And because this was a COVID year, that's why I kept it the same way. I can make it 3.2, but again, we might be in the same boat we were this year and that we might not get it.
Yeah.
And if we're saying on the other sales tax that we might see a slight increase based on what we collected this year, then that was the same reality and thought that went into economic development tax.
Okay.
Because, you know, they're based on the same sales.
Right. I just wonder, I agree with what you've done. I'm just curious why we as a city were sort of thinking it was going to be, I mean, that's $500,000.
3.2,
Yeah.
I think that was when-
2.7 to 3.2 is $500,000.
and Bola can add to this. I think that you know, that came from the consultants, but that's with all things being normal, 3.2. And what might happen in 21 is we start inching towards 3 million, and then 2022, you know, it may inch it once, you know, COVID goes away or we get more stabilizer back to whatever our new normal is going to be. I just felt like we should at least kind of keep it towards what happened this year to make sure we're going to have enough to cover our debt service, which we will. You know, our debt service is like it's a little less than 2 million, I think what I put in the memo, for the next 3 years. So that would cover it.
So the difference for next year is the fact that there won't be a lag. You know, this tax is already in place. So what we experienced this year, where we didn't see anything in January, February, that won't be the case next year. And then what we just also have to, you know, figure out is there going to be a vaccine, you know, developed and everything go back to normal so people can start shopping and, you know, living their lives like they used to. Once again, even though we're going to see some shortfall in our revenue projection, we rest on the fact that we have stores in Brentwood that people, you know, patronize for their basic needs, which others around us, you know, unfortunately don't have the same experience. So I think these numbers are good. We can always come back with a budget amendment if things look like it was initially projected, you know, by our consultants back last year.
Thank you.
There any other questions? I mean, just as an observation, even with a conservative estimate, I'm impressed by the revenue. I thought, considering what we're living through, that, you know, it would be, I hoped for the best, but was prepared for numbers to be quite different from that. So that is good. All right, so I guess if there are no other questions as to looking at projected revenues, the fun part, of course, is going to be looking at costs that come later. We'll move along. We've got, or I'm sorry, Karen, was there anything else to that?
No, that was it, unless there were any more questions.
And I'm not seeing that there are. Okay, so item E is Finance 2020 public hearing on property tax rates. Who's taking that one?
Actually, this is just more, or should have been more of a, hang on here, FYI to let you know that this is coming up. Those numbers, I think there's something attached. That's not the correct numbers. The numbers for the public hearing coming up in September haven't been calculated yet. We just started getting the stuff from the auditors and the county to do that. So this is more for an FYI, but that will be coming up, a public hearing with the property tax rates. That's part of the budget process. I think it's in the calendar too.
Does anyone have any questions on that? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Karen. I will move along. Item number 8, there's nothing on the consent agenda. Item number 9, there's no old business. Item 10, new business. Department 2020 cost containment.
Okay, that's
Taking that
probably
one.
gonna be me again too. And in your memo, I started out showing you what that one slide, or actually the 3 slides that Bolin put together for general capital and stormwater and parks, which was a total of 1.9 million in cost containments. And then over the last probably month, BOLA has asked the department heads to prioritize what it was they would like to see to be able to get in this year's budget, with the caveat that they may not get everything restored back. So they had to prioritize it. Well, based on that, is the chart for, well, first of all, the personnel savings have all been realized from police, I think, had some, fire had some, finance, and then, of course, Parks and Rec through not necessarily vacancies, but what we had to do during COVID. So then under the general fund, community services, we were requesting back $5,600 for newsletter and miscellaneous contractual. Police asked back for some overtime that they were going to release, and supplies and materials. I believe that's where the ammo came in for $20,000. For a total of $25,600 in as a portion, the percentage of the original cost containments at 6.3%. Capital improvement, fire was asking for their ambulance debt service. And when they say debt service, that means we would be purchasing, but like the fire, we are leasing it. I mean, not the fire truck. The fire truck was a 5-year lease, and I think we paid it off this year, or last, maybe this year. Anyway, I think it was this year. And so that's why we thought, well, we can lease this, the ambulance, but the ambulance would be over 3-year period, not 5, not as long. And then the ADA, since Terry had already started that, we have I think we have Horner and Schifrin on, and Terry can talk more about that. IT, Larry let Bola know that his priority would be the desktop and printer replacement, and he gave us the second priorities, but said this would be more important. Planning and development really needs that MyGov module for code enforcement. Public Works, replace 2 trucks and a skid steer. And I know one of the trucks, I believe, has a blown engine. And with that, that's 603,000 roughly, and that's 7.4% of the capital portion. I mean, I'm not 57.4%, so over half. Parks and stormwater, they need to replace a truck because of my understanding, they have a truck that won't go in reverse. It'll drive, but it won't go backwards. That was 45,000, and I believe that's all that Eric would be asking for. So that's 8.5% for a total of 673,000, roughly 674, and 34% of the overall cost containment. Based on the spreadsheet of the budget of the July, if you look at what the current year, what we expect to get through, this all is modeled into that, and it will work based on the assumptions we're making. So it is our recommendation that the Ways and Means possibly send this to the full board, and then for approval to release this money, and then maybe next month, after the sales tax figures come in again, beginning of the month, revisit to see if there can be another level of their priorities, if it can be used from the cost containment. That's all I had.
Are there any questions?
Mm-mm.
Alderman Gould, you're muted. Okay.
Yeah, no, on the fire, can you break down the cost for between the ambulance and the ADA project? How much what percentage, I guess, of that number is for the ambulance that you need, and what percentage is the ADA?
Terry, do you want to take it or?
I'm happy to. Alderman
Okay.
Gould, pardon me, on a lease purchase on the ambulance, we will have a financing piece that's part of this approval. We will have the latest information on that, unfortunately, tomorrow. But we are looking at about $60,000 in cost for a initial signing payment to order the ambulance. So the way this works is it'll take 6, 7, 8 months, depending upon availability and scheduling, to get an ambulance built once we place an order. So we'll have to make one payment for 2020 to secure all of the order and get it going with the manufacturer. So in 2021, though, we will have 2 payments a year totaling approximately $117,000. So from that, and that takes care of the ambulance, and then that 117 would go on until the lease ended, and then we would own the ambulance outright. On the ADA project, we're about $127-ish thousand away from having that completed. So the $2 are significant, but they're not huge. And we got bathrooms torn out of the firehouse that are in limbo waiting on that project to start. And so I feel it's critical we get that going so we can wrap it up in this budget year. So does that answer your question?
It does, and I guess that's what I was kind of wondering, what the urgency of the ADA access would be, because, you know, I don't know that it's going to be used much, especially right now with COVID, and there's not many people, I'm sure, coming in. So
if we were in a position, we didn't have 2 primary bathrooms torn out of place, and several
sure,
other
that makes sense.
going, I could shelf this for a while. The other critical thing is I'd like to get it wrapped up in this budget year so it doesn't affect 21. And then we'll be in good shape on the ADA thing for a while at that point. And to your point, I understand exactly what you're saying, but if we didn't have so much demolition done early on this, I wouldn't be pushing quite as hard.
Sounds rustic.
Have we looked at?
The good news is we have a couple other bathrooms, but the bad news is the 2 that are out are kind of critical. So.
Yeah. And have we looked at? I would imagine final construction is what the number is needed for this project. And have we bid, or do we know that construction costs are covered in this? Or?
Yeah, we budgeted for this project in the beginning of the year. This is all within budget. The project started off, we had budgeted $160,000. The low bid came in at $166,200. So we started off the project just a little bit in the hole, but we're on track as of right now. Contractors poised and ready to come in as soon as I give them the nod that the city's approved this, and get started and try to wrap it up by the end of November so we can close it out in December. So we are definitely within budget. We've had no surprises to date. And so barring anything that's unknown that we haven't found yet, we should be in good shape.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions? Am I reading this table correctly? That the line item total requests, and then at the far right it says 34%. Is that 673,000 or 674? Let's call it. Does that represent 34% of the overall cost containment measures?
That's correct. That's correct.
So you know, I would still say we're proceeding rather.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's whatever 100 minus 34 is. I'm a lawyer, not an accountant.
And I'll just add, Terry and I have talked, and his 2 things are probably going to be less than that 417,000, but that's what we used and gave you in the beginning. But as a cost containment, it's probably going to be less though. But again, It all fits in with what we think, how we're going to end up at the end of the year. It's what we budgeted anyway. We're on pretty much on budget, slightly under in revenues, but we'll still be okay. And you're correct. It was the conservative approach again, rather than asking for everything. It was asking for it piecemeal, and they had to prioritize what they wanted or what they needed. Actually, let me put it that way, not what they wanted, because I think they wanted everything, but they prioritized. So that's why we put in the caveat also that we'd like to revisit it again next month. That doesn't mean we'll come back with anything, but who knows? I don't know what the sales tax will be again next month, and that's why we asked, we'll wait and see. Some things though, like the ambulance and some of these vehicles that are bought on state contract or state bid, they need to get their order in, because we can't take it out of this year's budget if we don't physically take possession of it, other than when we do like the lease. But if we outright buy these things, if we don't physically take possession of them this year, we can't take them out of this year's budget. So that's why they put them in to ask for them at this point. And
so even if, and God forbid, the world falls apart, we still have 66% of our cost containment measures in place.
Right, that's correct.
Okay, well, at this point, I would entertain a motion to approve the, we'll call it the first round of, I guess, cost containment release is reflected in this memo, and forwarding on to the full board for approval.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so we've got a motion made by Kathy, seconded by Nancy. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing none, roll call, please.
Chairwoman Sims,
Yes.
Alderman Gould,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill,
Yes.
and Alderwoman Tice.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Item number 11, citizen comment. If there's anyone out in the citizen gallery that would like to comment, please state your name and your address, and you'll be given up to 3 minutes. I'm hearing crickets, so.
I don't see anyone.
Don't see anyone. All right, well then we'll move along. Item 12, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Just over my normal goal of 1 hour, but given that we started late. So we're on, I'm looking at my schedule. I guess I should have done this before we adjourned.